Thank you so much for joining us. This is, I feel, a long awaited feature for Houzz Pro. My name is Andy. I'm on the product marketing team. We have with us today Suman, our QuickBooks integration expert. And this is the QuickBooks Online Canada integration overview, a long awaited feature, like I mentioned. So let me just go through our agenda and then I will hand it over to Suman. Okay, so we will be covering today why connect Houzz Pro and QuickBooks Online. What are the benefits? How to connect your Houzz Pro account to your QuickBooks Online account. How to do your mapping, how to map your Houzz Pro account to your QuickBooks chart of accounts. Very important. How documents and payments sync to QBO. And then best practices and how to get your integration started off right, how to get set up for success. So for those of you just joining, feel free, if you'd like to, drop your name and your business or location in the chat. We will use the Q&A section for questions. So if you do have a question that comes up during the webinar, please feel free to drop that question in the Q&A section. And Suman will also be pausing periodically to see if we have any questions that we can ask live. And from here, I will hand it over to Suman.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, like Andy said, this is a super awaited integration and super excited that we finally get to present it and hear feedback and all of that. So to start off, I'm going to kind of cover why connect Houzz to QuickBooks Online. The biggest advantage I would say is that it makes things so much easier and faster because now it alleviates manual entry. You don't have to manually enter information into QuickBooks. So that obviously saves time. If you're working with an accountant, that saves them time. And also, if you are, using, like if you have to manually enter it in QuickBooks, there is room for error. And this way, because it's integrating from Houzz to QuickBooks, it makes it a lot easier because it is sending the same information over. So numbers and things like that, there's less chance that you're making a mistake. If you're manually entering it, there's room for that. And just some quick pointers, the integration is one way, so it syncs from Houzz to QuickBooks and not the other way around. So if you make a change in QuickBooks, that's not updating into Houzz. But if you obviously make an update in Houzz, that will push into QuickBooks. So I'm going to start off with my demo account. So to integrate, you want to head to the left side of your tab, go into settings, and you should see under integrations, you should see QuickBooks Online. This is still just open to beta testers as of now. So if you don't see this option for QuickBooks Online, feel free to reach out to us and we can put you on we can ask tech team to open this QuickBooks Online option so you can test it out. And this should be available to all users very soon. So you want to go into QuickBooks Online. I've already connected my Houzz over to QuickBooks. So what you see is my QuickBooks Online Sync dashboard. This basically, once you start your integration, this is basically a snapshot of all your documents that has synced over to QuickBooks. So as you can see, you have projects, so you can go over your projects. You have types, so you can filter to see your invoices, your retainer, purchase order, or have those documents synced, not synced. So you can filter this dashboard, and you also have status, so you can filter by status. So if you wanted to see what the documents that have synced, and then if you have disabled sync, so you have an option to disable sync for documents. If you don't want specific documents to sync over, you have that option as well. And as we create a document, you'll see how this looks in the dashboard. But this is the screen you are going to see once you're connected. And then the next, we're going to head over to settings. Okay, so in your settings, you It's the day you connect is the day you'll see as your sync documents starting from. So in this instance, it was today I connected, so it says May 28th. You have the option to predate it. So you could say, well, I want the integration to start from Jan 1st. If you are working with an accountant, make sure you do ask them when you want to start the sync from, in case they've already entered the information in QuickBooks. You don't want duplication, but you can always predate your sync. The next is your payment settings. This is for payments that's against your estimates or retainers. So there are two ways to sync those payments over to QuickBooks. One is unapplied payments, and the second option is sales receipt. And we'll cover both. And feel free, if you had any questions till this part, like feel free to chime in. You can write in the chat, and then we can cover that before I move forward. Alrighty. Okay. So the two payment methods, as I said, was sales receipt and unapplied payment. The most recommended one now is unapplied payments. So most accounting firms and bookkeepers prefer unapplied payments, but you do have an option to map it to sales receipt as well. The way unapplied payments works is that, let's say you take a payment against an estimate. Houzz allows you to take payment against an estimate and also allows you to take payments against a retainer. However, in QuickBooks, there isn't an option to take a payment against an estimate, and there isn't a document type called retainer. And essentially, this payment is basically you taking payment upfront from your client before the job has been done. So you're taking a deposit. And when you sync it over to unapplied payments, what happens is, let's say your client is called John Smith. You will see a payment under John Smith for, let's say, $50,000. You'll see that amount under John Smith. It will say unapplied payment. That means it's not applied to any document. And then in-house, as you apply that payment towards an invoice, or you convert a paid estimate over to an invoice, in QuickBooks, you should see that move from unapplied payments over to income. So all of this is done automatically. You don't need to necessarily do anything. This is just for you to know how that's going to look in your QuickBooks. So if you were to run your profit and loss, you will see like an unapplied payment, and you kind of know, okay, this is for a payment against the estimate or retainer. And some accounting firms and bookkeepers, what they do is at the end of the year, because this payment is not income yet, it's liability, they will journal entry it into a liability account and then reverse the journal entry as the next year starts. So this is just how that looks. The second option is sales receipt. But before I dived into that, any questions regarding unapplied payments?
We do not have any questions yet.
Okay, cool. Alrighty. Okay, so the second option is sales receipt. With sales receipt, what happens is payments against an estimate or retainer will sync over to QuickBooks and create a document called sales receipt. The sales receipt basically hits a liability account. And then as you apply the payment towards an invoice, that moves from liability over to income. The biggest thing to know about this is that the payment application comes over as a negative line item on the invoice. So it just depends if you didn't want to see it as a negative line item, but as a payment application over an invoice, you want to pick unapplied payments. So the default is unapplied payments. So when you connect, you'll see this, but you also have the option to map it to sales receipt if you'd like to. Any questions regarding these two payment types?
Yes. I apply payments to invoices. Will those payments automatically flow to QuickBooks?
Yes, it will. So payments applied against invoice will automatically sync to QuickBooks. And even if it's a manual payment or if you're receiving online payment, either or, it's going to be the same. Yeah, it will sync over to QuickBooks. Alrighty, next is your deposit account. So your deposit account is, once you connect, this is your default. So Houzz creates a few default accounts in your chart of accounts. So anything that's default that's created from Houzz, you should see it as like a Houzz Pro on your chart of accounts, but you could map it to your own checking account. So let's say you have like your bank account that you already have in your QuickBooks. You just want to click the drop down. Once you're connected, you should see the option, and you can map it to your own checking account. Um, and then the next is the retainer deposit account. This is most important if you have your mapping set to sales receipt. You want to make sure you're mapping it to a liability account. The Houzz Pro retainer deposit is a liability account, so in case you didn't have one, like a client retainer deposit account in your QuickBooks, you could create one or just leave it to default, but you want to make sure that if you've set this to sales receipt, it needs to hit a liability account. So you want to leave the mapping to either the default or map it to a liability account. Any questions so far?
Let's see. Can you demo applied payments and show where deposit account is?
So, where it syncs over, yeah, we will do an invoice and a payment so you can see how it looks in QuickBooks. But just to head over to QuickBooks, and let me just show you a chart of accounts. So this is what I meant, that you have like a Houzz Pro payable bank account, and then any payment received against an invoice, if you leave it to default, this is where it's going to hit. But if you have it mapped to your checking account, your own, you will see the payment against that account. Any other questions?
Did you want to show just where the deposit account mapping is again in Houzz Pro?
Yeah, it's under your deposit account is this one, and it says deposit account. And then your drop down will show all of your accounts in your chart of accounts in your QuickBooks.
Great. And we also had a question, what if all payments are prepaid except the final holdback? And I think what he's saying is payments are recorded against whether it's invoices or estimates, and then there's a final payment made at the close of the project, I think is what I'm understanding.
Yeah, so if you had prepayments, and by prepayments you mean if you had payments against an estimate or a retainer, and then there is also a balance on the invoice, yeah, absolutely. So let's say you had a retainer payment for 50,000, and then you had an invoice for 100,000, and you could apply the retainer a partial payment against an invoice, and then let's say you still had 50,000 that's owed. You could send out the invoice, they can send the payment for the remainder, and you could apply it towards the invoice. Is that where you were? Hopefully that answers.
So. Yeah, let us know if that wasn't quite what you were asking.
Yeah, feel free to like give me a little bit more context, and then we can go over it as well. And to continue on, the next is your bill pay account. So in-house, you have an option. So the first part was your invoices and payments against retainer, estimates, and invoices. The second is your bill pay account. So in-house, you have an option to create a purchase order. And then when you create that purchase order, you can log a payment against that purchase order, and it gives you an option to create a bill and bill payment into QuickBooks. So on the PO, you can indicate if it was a check, if it was a credit card, and then based on that, it's going to hit those accounts. So if you wanted to map it to a checking account, you could do that. And then if you had a specific credit card account in your chart of accounts, you could map it to that as well. Any questions regarding bill pay?
Nope, no questions there.
Alrighty, okay, great. Tax mapping, and then this depends if it pertains to your state or not, but you have an option if you are paying tax to your vendor, and this might differ from state to state, but if you do pay taxes to your vendor, then you have an option to track that. So on a purchase order, you can indicate if an item was taxable or not. And then when that PO syncs, and then when you create a bill from that purchase order, it breaks down that tax line item as a separate line item. So let's say you paid $15 as tax, it's going to be broken down as a separate line item. And then when you want, if you get a deduction, I'm not sure if Canada allows a deduction, but based on your state, you want to talk to your CPA. And if you do get a deduction on taxes based on the taxes you paid to your vendor, it's a great way to have that, to run that report in QuickBooks to see, well, how much taxes have we paid already. So great feature if it is something that would that your state would allow you to get a deduction on. Um, and then your payable is just your accounts payable. You can map it, leave it to default, or map it to accounts payable. Uh, Now we move on to chart of account mapping. So for GC, if you have products, all of your products on an invoice hits an income account. And then this is the default is called Houzz Pro products. But if you wanted, you could create like a sale. So if you wanted it to be called a sale of product income, you could change your mapping to whatever income account. But essentially, the whole purpose is if you have products on an invoice and if you have services on an invoice, it kind of breaks it down. So that way, when you run your profit and loss, you can see how much money you made selling products versus services. So it's not lumped together. Um, and if you have a design account, it's a little bit different. Uh, the way the product mapping works is that you could actually be more specific. You could map your categories to specific income accounts in QuickBooks. So right now, all of your product mapping, it's going to one income account. But for design, you could say, I want my accessories to go to an accessory income. So your product income can be further broken down. And that's the same for service mapping. GC Pros should have that available to them pretty soon, where you could also do a more specific mapping. And also, our integrations team is working on cost code mapping. So if you have cost codes in QuickBooks, you could map your cost codes created in Houzz to specific cost codes in QuickBooks. So these two features for GC is something that we're working on. We don't have an exact ETA, but super exciting feature, and I'm excited for that to be rolled out and for all of you to kind of see how that's going to look as well. Any questions on this so far?
I think we are good so far.
Great. Okay. So this was the income side of it. There's a flip side to it, which is your Houzz Pro purchases. This is nothing but a cost of goods sold account. So if you wanted to map it to another cost of goods sold account, you could absolutely do that. So you have purchases. You could map it to supplies and materials. So it is just a cost of goods sold account. And this is anything that you're entering on a purchase order. And when you convert it to a bill, this is the account it hits. So all of your invoices and your income is hitting your sales or your income mapping, and then all of your expenses that's on a purchase order converted to a bill will hit your cost of goods sold account. So that's the flip side of it. And then for service mapping, again, the default is Houzz Pro services, but if you wanted to map it to a different like service income, you could do that. And you could also, there's a flip side. So if you have like labor as your default expense account, you could map it to that. Any questions with chart of account mapping? Even for design, if you wanted more info on it, just feel free to chime in.
We did have someone mention in one of the polls, they'd like to learn how to properly connect QBO with Houzz Pro, which obviously you're going over, but they keep getting an error with setting up their tax mapping. So I don't know if we can always, if whoever wants to let me know in the chat or in the Q&A who that was specifically, we can always reach out if you're still having issues after the webinar. But if you have any feedback on the tax mapping, I know it's a little tricky for.
Yeah, we'll get to that as well. So I'm going to cover tax mapping next. But once I'm on it, just feel free, like if you're like, hey, I'm running into an error. And I will also go back into the connection. So if you're trying to connect and you're running into any issue, like feel free to reach out to us. But I can try to disconnect and reconnect just so you see the mapping, the settings. So I'll do that once I'm done with this. I'll just kind of disconnect and reconnect so you can kind of see all of the steps you need to go through before you connect. The next part is your document sync exceptions. So this is if you did not want like your purchase orders to sync over or your change order to sync over, you basically can come here and check mark that. So it makes it easier. So if you're like, hey, we would like to enter a cost of goods sold just in QuickBooks, we don't necessarily want that information flowing into QuickBooks, you could click this little checkbox, and then once you check that, that document won't flow into QuickBooks. And the last setting is your cost and markups. So now you have an option and you can decide how you want things to flow into QuickBooks. So one is if you wanted your cost and markup to be lumped together, which most pros prefer that. So the markup is not broken down. So let's say on your invoice, you indicated that the cost was 100, and then you put in the percentage of markup was, let's say, 25%. So then your total selling price was 125, right? When that syncs over to QuickBooks, if you did not have the split markup option, it's going to sync to QuickBooks as cost of tiles 125 on the invoice. But then if you were to say, no, I want the markup, I want to split my markup and cost, on your invoice, you'll have the cost, say, cost of tile 100 and then markup for tile 25. It will create two different products in your QuickBooks. So you will have two items under your product and services in your QuickBooks. I just wanted to let you guys know that. So if you were to look into your QuickBooks products and services, you might see cost of, or you could see, we might see tiles and then markup tiles 25. So if you were to if you would like to see that breakdown on an invoice level, you could absolutely do that. If your invoice is not something that your client would ever see, then you could have that broken down, but you have the option either way. And once you're done changing any of the settings, you just want to make sure you click I acknowledge that saving these changes will impact features. So you just want to click this and then save it, and then all of your changes will be saved. Any questions on your mapping, general settings?
No, we just had another mention about tax mapping. We did have, I'll let you continue. I responded in the Q&A for a little further clarification on another question. I think we're good.
Okay, cool. Alrighty. Now to go under tax mapping, I know it's a fun topic, taxes. So before we dive into your tax mapping, the biggest thing you want to do is in your QuickBooks, you want to make sure you set up your sales tax. So you want to set up automated sales tax. So in this case, I set it up for Ontario. So if you go under manage sales tax, you basically would, so automated sales tax in QuickBooks is a feature that QuickBooks has where it will automatically calculate sales tax based on the shipping address on the invoice. It makes things a lot easier. But again, I would highly recommend that once you have this feature turned on, just to periodically check your invoices in-house in QuickBooks to see if the sales tax rates matching on both, because in-house it is a manual sales tax rate. So what I mean by that is in-house you're setting up the sales tax rate yourself. So you go in, you're seeing, and I'll kind of show you what I'm talking about. Whereas in QuickBooks, it's automatically calculating the sales tax rate based on your shipping address, but this is the tax rates in your QuickBooks, so you want to make sure you do that. So that's an important feature you want to have set up in your QuickBooks before you start the integration, is turning on your automated sales tax. Now to go back into my Houzz account, if you go under settings and go under business documents, just to quickly show you where you would set up your sales tax rate in Houzz, under accounting, you want to set up your sales tax rate. So I put in 13%, I put it the tax name, and then you can add in sales tax. If you have a 0%, you want to add that in as well. You can see it's inclusive, exclusive, and that all of that information. Now to go back into your QuickBooks Online settings. Okay, so go under tax mapping. What you want to do is you want to map a sales tax rate that you've set up in Houzz to a sales tax rate that's in QuickBooks. So in this instance, you saw the sales tax rate that QuickBooks created, so you want to map it to that. And you want to do it even if you have like a 0%, I would say set that up just so that all of your tax rates that's in Houzz is mapped to all of your tax rates in QuickBooks. I know someone mentioned that they were running into an issue here. Was that the issue you were seeing? Were you not able to map it? Feel free to put that on in the chat, or we can always take this outside the webinar. Alrighty, so you can add more sales tax rates and then map it to a QuickBooks tax rate. And then once you're done doing that, just go ahead and hit save. Any questions with tax mapping? All right.
Let's see. Nope, I think we're good.
Okay, cool. Now to quickly go under vendor mapping. This is if you have been using QuickBooks for a long time. If you are creating vendors in Houzz, you do have an option. If you have created a vendor, you could create that vendor in Houzz and then map it to a specific vendor in QuickBooks. Typically, what happens is that if you have a vendor that is Amazon, and then if you have the same vendor in QuickBooks, even if it's spelled a little bit differently in Houzz and QuickBooks, what happens is that QuickBooks will automatically create a brand new vendor in your QuickBooks because it's assuming it's a different vendor. So just if you did want to do that, you could map your vendors that you created in Houzz to specific vendors in QuickBooks just to avoid if you did not want to deal with duplication. But if you're brand new and it's Houzz will automatically create those vendors for you, you don't have to worry about vendor mapping. And the last part is your connection. So this basically shows if your QuickBooks Tax Center is set up, if you're subscribed, your QuickBooks ID, and that. And if I was, so just to show you how the connection looks, if I were to disconnect, I can always reconnect and show you how that looks. So, okay, so I'm going to go ahead and click connect. So this is the settings you're going to see before you set up your QuickBooks, Houzz with QuickBooks. So one is set up your tax agency. We already covered that. The next is you want to turn off any automations in QuickBooks. So if you have any automated features, you want to make sure you turn those features off. It's in QuickBooks. If you click on Manage Automations, it should take you to that screen in QuickBooks, and these are your automation settings. So this week, QuickBooks doesn't automatically populate anything into your QuickBooks, automatically apply payments. You don't want QuickBooks to do that because that would create a mess in your books. Next is if you want purchase orders to sync to QuickBooks. Again, you need to be in a specific tier. QuickBooks Online Plus and higher is what has purchase order feature enabled in QuickBooks. And you can always, if you have that package of QuickBooks, you can turn it on, and it's super simple. If you click into that, my purchase order is already turned on, and then you just go ahead and hit connect. Any questions regarding this?
Let's see. I think we are good right now.
Alrighty, okay. And great. So I'm just gonna create a project, and Let's go ahead and create a document together. So just to kind of go over it, documents will sync from an invoice will sync from Houzz to QuickBooks. There's a couple of it's called like auto triggers. That means that when you take those steps, it will automatically sync to QuickBooks, which is if you create an invoice and then send it to your client. So sending it or copy link is a trigger. If you log a payment against the invoice, that's an automatic trigger. If you were to issue the invoice, that's a trigger. And what I mean by that is by taking that step, it will automatically sync to QuickBooks. But let's say you still wanted to sync a document even before you sent it to your client or logged a payment, you could always sync a draft document. So you could go into your dashboard and sync it, or just going to add an item. So, right. Okay, cool. So this is done. I'm just going to put in. Okay, so as you can see, it says when sent or paid or issued, this will sync the document, or you can also sync a draft version of it. And I'm just going to change my sync date as well. Any questions regarding this? Oh, I do not.
No, not yet.
Oh, cool. Okay, and I'm just gonna. Great. So let's head over to that invoice we created. And that's the same for estimates. Once approved, it will sync over to QuickBooks. Once sent, once you log a payment, all of that would be a trigger. Okay, sales tax rate is done. And then we are going to go in and, okay, and just, alrighty. It says that because we didn't have taxes set up for this, but let's just go into this and sync now because I didn't have tax set up. So it says sync in progress. Any questions? And a real quick, the project will sync into, as you can see, it says sync complete. And if you click into sync complete, it gives you an option to view in QuickBooks. So you can just click into this and it's going to automatically take you to the invoice in QuickBooks. So super easy. You don't have to go hunting for the invoice. You can just click view in QuickBooks and then you will see this and you can see the sales tax and then the sales tax rate and all of that. A project in Houzz syncs to QuickBooks as a sub-customer. So the client name will sync as the main customer, and then the project name will sync over as the sub-customer into QuickBooks. Any questions so far?
No, we are good.
Great. I think we're pretty much covered most of the process of the integration and how to connect and how the documents will sync over to QuickBooks. Some best practices I would like to say once you're connected, once you're set up is first, you just want to make sure that you're making your changes in-house and you're not making any changes in QuickBooks because the sync is one way. So if you wanted to change the number here, you want to just make those edits in-house and then have that sync over to QuickBooks. So something you want to tell your team if you're working with an accounting firm, just so that everybody is looped in. Again, payments received, if it's manual, if it was an ACH, you want to make sure that you log that payment in-house and you're not logging it in QuickBooks, and then Houzz will show that there is no payment, and then when you try to log it in, you'll end up with a duplicate. So you want to make sure that you are mindful with that part of it. So that's part 2. And if you are using bank feeds, which is a feature in QuickBooks where it automatically uploads all of your transactions that you've done through the month, you download those transactions, and then it gives you 3 options, either to add it, to match it, or exclude it. if you have the integration where you're syncing Houzz over to QuickBooks, you want to make sure you're matching payments that you're entering against the invoice to the deposit that came through. Matching is basically telling QuickBooks, hey, this is already in the system. Please don't create a new one. You want to refrain from adding, because adding, what it does is it's prompting your bank feed to create that document into QuickBooks, and that will you will end up with duplication and things like that. We also advise you, like if you haven't worked with QuickBooks, just, if you can work with an accountant, that would be the best way to go about it, because there are two different softwares. You want to make sure that you are also working with someone who knows how to handle QuickBooks. So these are some big things once you're connected. And also, you do have a QuickBooks support package offer, which is $49 a month. So if you want to ever leverage that, you could do that as well, where you can talk to a QuickBooks Online support specialist. And I can kind of give training or provide if you had any more questions, any detailed information. We don't do your books, or we don't deal with your QuickBooks in that sense, but if you run into an error, feel free to reach out to us. So any questions before we wrap this up?
Yeah, we had someone ask if we could look at making an estimate and then making an invoice from the estimate, and how those look in QuickBooks.
Sure. So an estimate will sync to QuickBooks as an estimate, and then when you convert that estimate over to an invoice and that syncs over, that's going to sync to QuickBooks as a separate document. They're not linked in QuickBooks, but we can definitely try to create. We have some time, so we can absolutely create one real quick. So let's create the estimate first. And feel free to add in any questions you might have in the meantime. Super excited for everyone to try this. Alrighty, so I'm creating the same document again. HSD, alrighty. Okay, as you see, I copied the link. It says sync in progress. Give it a second. Oh, cool. So it says sync complete. Again, you can view in QuickBooks, but let's go ahead and create an invoice. Everything looks good. You can add more items. And I'm going to go ahead and copy this link as well. Right, sync complete. Great. So as you can see in your Houzz, it's a linked document. So you have one linked document. The estimate is linked to the invoice. Let's go to the estimate in Houzz first, and then I can show you how that looks in QuickBooks. So this is the estimate. It has the estimate number, and it usually has an HZ because it's coming on from Houzz. This is the invoice that's synced over from Houzz to QuickBooks. Any questions with this? Awesome. Yeah, feel free to chime in if you had any questions. We give it a minute or two if you had any questions, but hopefully this helped. If you you were hesitant to try, hopefully this makes it easier. It's super simple, and yes, this is your dashboard, the one I mentioned in the beginning, where you can see the documents that have synced. You can click on the three dots, and if you wanted to disable sync, you have the option. So this is your dashboard. It's a snapshot into everything that's syncing to QuickBooks, has not synced. If you have an error, makes it a lot easier. You're not hunting for those documents. Makes it super easy for accountants, because then they go into the dashboard, they see what has synced, what has not synced, and all of that.
Let's see. I have a few more questions. This is about tax rates. Our challenge in BC is that we have two tax rates and different items within one receipt, we'll have either one or both of the taxes. We don't want to set a tax rate for a whole receipt. So I breaking out two invoices separately.
Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, there isn't a way to map it to two different tax rates in house. And so it is easiest to kind of break it down. We in US too, sometimes for services and products have two separate tax rates, and we usually recommend having two separate invoices. And then real quick, just want to inform that I believe QBO is live for all Canada Houzz Pro accounts and not just beta. So you don't even have to put your name out there. You should see the option to integrate. And again, if you don't, feel free to reach out to us and we can inform tech to open it up for you. So you should be seeing it, but if you don't, feel free to reach out to us.
Let's see. Is there a way to pre-select HST 13% for all products and services and apply this automatically? I have several instances where not all items had HST applied and I had to absorb the loss. So I think that's setting a specific rate for products and services, which I know we don't do.
That's a great feature request. So I'm sure we can add that in and talk to tech about it. But that's a great feature request for sure.
Yes, and like I said, we'll be going through any questions or comments that don't get answered here. We'll definitely follow up with folks. Okay, I don't think we have any further questions. Thank you so much, Simon. I hope this was helpful for everyone. We encourage everyone, definitely, if you're not connected yet, go through and connect your Houzz Pro and QuickBooks account. Let us know any other feedback you have, questions. You can definitely reach out to support in your Houzz Pro account. If you think of something after the fact, a question that maybe came to mind afterwards, please reach out using our chat feature. And we can follow up with you and help out, and hopefully everyone can get their accounts integrated and start using the Houzz Pro QuickBooks integration.
Yeah, thank you guys for joining, and yeah, feel free. We'd love to hear any feedback you all had regarding the integration, but super excited, and there are more great features coming along. So we should have cost code mapping and specific category mapping for GC pros. So yeah, great things ahead. So
thank you. Thanks, Simon.
bye guys.